Welcome to the Irish NFL Show's schedule release special. We feel like we've been released from our cages now that we have some actual games to look forward to. Before we get to the NFL schedule, though, we also have the actual Aer Lingus College Football Classic to look forward to. Now officially 100 days from that clash between Georgia Tech and Florida State at the Aviva Stadium. Very much looking forward to that on the 24th of August. Now, you may well have seen your own NFL team schedule by now, and given that there were more leaks than the roof of Old Trafford a couple of weeks ago, as Brian said, there's a good chance you knew a lot of the details before the 1 a.m. Embargo this morning. That's all now confirmed, though, and most of the leaks turned out to be fairly accurate, but everyone's pouring through the big marquee matchups, weighing up the strength of schedule metrics, trying to figure out whether to plan for a trip to New Orleans next February for Super Bowl 59. As always, thanks to our partner, QuinnBet. QuinnBet are offering enhanced pricing on a couple of off-season NFL bets if you fancy that you can pick who's going to be in New Orleans and who's going to win it all next February. Ravens currently 11-1. The Chiefs are 7-1 to win it all with that enhanced pricing this upcoming season. Those odds are only available until close of business tomorrow. Both of those teams, of course, squaring off the season in the season opener, and we'll get to that matchup very closely. Before we do so, though, to celebrate the season release, and the Jags coming back to London for two games, one at Wembley Stadium and one at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, we have a signed Trevor Lawrence mini helmet to give away. Brian is displaying there for those of you watching us live on YouTube. Just retweet this very self-same live broadcast that you're watching on X. That's at IRE NFL. To all of you who follow or who need the link on Instagram, you just follow the Irish NFL Show. So if you just follow us at IRE NFL Show, you will instantly be in with a chance of winning, and we'll draw the winner of that Trevor Lawrence helmet for anybody who follows the instruction there. We have the gang all here tonight. We've Brian, Colm, Shane and Noel alongside me, Connor. And let's start with the opening slate of games for week one. Here they are in all of their glory, so we can get a quick overview of what's happening. Ravens at Chiefs we'll get to in just a moment. Steelers at Falcons, that's an interesting one where Arthur Smith faces off already against his former team. Commanders at Bucks. Packers at Eagles, another tasty matchup. Titans at Bears. Raiders at Chargers. A lot of really good matchups there. But let's start with that very first game, which is Ravens at Chiefs in the Thursday night opener. Brian, you were there, as was Colm, to see the Chiefs win the Super Bowl. They go again, and they have a pretty stiff start against the Ravens. AFC Championship game rematch. Nice bit of scheduling for the NFL opener. They know how to manage these storylines masterfully. Ravens very much will feel like they have some unfinished business to attend to, and that things had gone on another path that would have been them squaring off against the 49ers in Allegiant Stadium.
I'm slightly surprised they went with this game. Fantastic game for all neutrals to look forward to in September. It's the kind of game where you're starving of NFL, and no matter who you support, you'll find a way to be navigating maybe a later start on the Friday and staying up for this one. And I think by the time September comes, we'll be all very excited. But it's surprising in a way because the NFL doesn't need any reason to put on a marquee game like this to open the season. They'll always get the interest. So for them to go with this for me, pretty much confirms and sums up where the NFL's heads at and where most fans' heads at is that these two are the leading knights in the AFC right now, the Ravens, with Lamar Jackson coming off an MVP season, and the Chiefs. And I think the Chiefs, in a way, will kind of be re-energized by this game as well as, again, another opportunity to put a marker down because they started slowly. By and large, it was a slow season last year, but they started off obviously losing to the Lions in the opening night, which was a bit of a surprise. And I think this is an opportunity to put down a marker. Bearing in mind, sometimes you look at week two as well as a significant week. They play the Bengals the following week. If they were to get off to a fast start at 2-0, having taken care of two teams in the AFC North with the bigger picture further down the line in terms of seedings, it could be a huge game, albeit very early on in the season. But obviously the Ravens, you touched on there, they'll obviously feel that they were aggrieved that they didn't make the Super Bowl, and they'll want to obviously, I suppose, get the revenge on that disappointing night last January. But a great game to start the season.
Colm, one of the last things we said as we wrapped our coverage in Las Vegas after the Super Bowl was if the Chiefs can win it in a down year, you're kind of shudder to think what they'll do when they go and address some of their issues, add to the wide receiver room, as they did during the draft and also with the signing of Hollywood Brown, and plug some of the holes. Do you like the Chiefs to start off the quest for a three-peat with a win here, or what kind of shape do you think they're going to be in for that season opener?
I saw a lot of the reaction when this initially came out Connor, was around, how much time Andy Reid was going to have to plan. And obviously, Andy Reid is an offensive genius and he has the best quarterback in the league. But Andy Reid's opening record isn't incredible. Like it's good. He certainly has he's a winning percentage. But as Brian talked about, the Lions beat them last year. I do fancy them in this though, because I think the Ravens have real problems right now. Now, in August that might look different, but the Ravens had brought in a significant number of players on one-year deals, and those players have moved on. They tend to be a team who brings players in during training camp, so we might see that happen again. But losing Mike Macdonald, I think, is a significant factor. He really had that defense playing incredibly well. He took players who had struggled elsewhere and got them to gel, and that defense was absolutely ferocious. The defense was the reason ultimately that they were still in that championship game for as long as they were. And him moving to Seattle, I do think that will have an impact. I think the Ravens will still be very good, and I think Derrick Henry is a great signing for them, because he's not going to have to be the kind of workhorse that he was with the Titans. But the Chiefs, it's not like they had their ideal off season thus far either. I have no doubt we will hear Patrick Mahomes emulate Peyton Manning's famous line about idiot kickers. And they could have done without that distraction. And Rishi Rice, let's see if we see him on a football field, certainly in the early part of the season. But overall, I think the Chiefs have strengthened it. Spags has a new deal. Andy Reid, they're talking about a new deal. I will say the thing that I think will be interesting around this as well, and to see what happens in the regular season, I think you won't see the Chiefs lean into Kelce. I think you saw that last year. Kelce came alive in the playoffs. I think that will be a recurring theme for as long as Travis continues to play.
Right, that's your Thursday opener. You don't have to wait too long for the next installment, because the Packers are playing the Eagles in Sao Paulo, first ever NFL game in Brazil on Friday. Somebody please give me a documentary about Philadelphia Eagles fans traveling to Sao Paulo. Give me Jason Kelce going mad in the favela. I just can't wait to see that. It needs to happen. Please. I'm manifesting it now. Shane, it's the first ever Brazil game. And it's a really intriguing matchup again, because you got a team that finished the season a lot stronger than a lot of people expected, and kind of unveiled themselves as contenders in waiting in the Packers a lot sooner than everybody expected, with Jordan Love as quarterback. And you have the Eagles, who absolutely collapsed down the stretch and got handled in the playoffs by the Bucs, but have made the typical Eagles off-season moves and look like they've tooled it up again, and will hope for much better things in the season ahead. What way do you see this one going?
Well, I think it's important for Nick Sirianni to try and get himself off the hot seat as quick as possible, because even the talk in the off season that he could potentially be replaced, that people are, of course, the whole Bill Belichick ghost is sort of hanging over the whole of the NFC East at the moment, which is, I think, a very unusual spot to be in. But you had to, like, as much as Nick Sirianni brought a very good Eagles team to the Super Bowl the previous year, that was a complete collapse in the tail end of last season, and the coaching has to take the blame for that. I know that there will be a lot of talk about the fact that this is an international game. Maybe he's getting away from the spotlight, but then at the same time, this is their first time playing in Brazil, and there are logistical elements around that. But it's the first game of the season. It's not like they're coming off from playing the previous Sunday, like a lot of the teams who head over to London or the UK are. But what I really find interesting about this is, like, they haven't given the Eagles, which I think they are the designated home team, of what I'm saying. They haven't given them an easy game. Like you outlined there, Connor, like the Green Bay Packers are upcoming. They have a Jordan Love who is proven, as get the Cowboys a good walloping, is giving a lot of hope to the Green Bay Packers, with all of the other talent they have, that they can really challenge coming into the next couple of years. It's a really strong test for the Eagles, who are now without Kelce, who led their tush push, a tactic which worked fantastically up until about midway through last season, and was exposed completely as a crutch that once they couldn't lean on it, that everything else in their offense collapsed. So it's on Jalen Hurts to refine his all of his offensive ability. It's on Nick Sirianni to show that he has spent the off season, kicking the ass that he needs to kick, and it's also on the rest of the squad to ensure that the guys that they've signed, including the 2 cornerbacks that they drafted quite high on, and Saquon Barkley, who is a brilliant running back and offensive talent, to say, hey, we have these guys, we're going to use them well against the Green Bay Packers, who will come into this feeling very prepared and feeling very confident that they can have a very good season.
Noel, the line on this one, in as much as you can place a huge amount of faith in it, given how far we are out from the actual hostilities commencing, is 1.5 points, and it's the Packers catching 1.5. The Eagles are favoured in this one, which I find interesting, given, as we said, where both teams finished up this season, given how young and upcoming that Packers team is and what we saw from them. Do you see it that way, or do you see Green Bay getting off the season with a win?
Connor, this is, Brian talked about the first game and how big that game is. For me, this was the game that stood out to me a lot for what you mentioned. We had a team that started the season really well and then collapsed, and another team that kind of went the opposite way. I mean, if you look at this time last year, the Eagles are being looked at as a Super Bowl contender, and obviously the Packers are being looked at as a team in transition, quarterback coming in, starting for the first time, a lot of young guys in the receiving core. And when you look at it now, you see the way the season went. I think it's the questions for me are the Eagles who we thought they were last season, or are they the team that collapsed? And same for the Packers. Are they the team now? Are they as good as they look this season, or will that young quarterback and that young receiving core take a step back? Will defenses kind of tweak things going up against Jordan Love? And for me, that's the big question. And it's going to be fascinating to find out. I know you don't find out everything in week 1, but it still gives you a bit of a pointer. And I think this game could go anyway, because I genuinely think both teams actually will be good in the coming season. So I do think it will be a close game, but I think it could go either way. The Packers are more than good enough if they continue that development to get the win. But on the flip side, if the Eagles do get back to what they were last season, I mean, they opened the season 10-1. They were flying. If they can kind of get back into that, as Shane said, if Sirianni has kicked a few people and got people moving again, then they could conceivably go out and win this. So I actually think no matter what happens, it will be a very good game, and both teams could come out of this as a winner. But I think the interesting fact on top of that then is it's a neutral venue, so nobody has like an advantage. So it's just 2 good teams on a neutral venue, and we're going to see how they have developed and if they've continued from last season or how that's going to look.
Yeah, there'll be no Lambeau Leap. We'll see if there's a Sao Paulo somersault when that one takes place on the first Friday of the NFL season. Column Steelers at Falcons. You pay Kirk Cousins an enormous amount of money, and then you pull the biggest record scratch of the entire draft by opting to use the number 8 pick on Michael Penix. Giving us all great entertainment on the night, it has to be said, and plenty to chew over since. The Falcons are favoured in this one, though, which also has the tasty side plot, as I mentioned briefly earlier, of Arthur Smith facing his former team, who never seemed to have a quarterback when he was there, and then go and spend a fortune on one and add another one in the first round of the draft.
Yeah, so some of that's on Arthur Smith himself. He's the man who famously didn't feel that he needed a quarterback. I had my doubts back when the Falcons initially gave that contract to Kirk Cousins, and clearly I wasn't alone, because Terry Fontenot evidently feels exactly the same way. I think I have my doubts around Kirk. I think he can only take you so far, and he's coming off the Achilles. So I think there are concerns there. But you know who I have more concerns about? Russell Wilson. Oh my goodness. He is the exact same guy that he was in Seattle and that he was in Denver, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, because Russ is Russ. But the all action videos, the going along to the different sports games, wearing the team's gear, the melodramatic interviews that he always gives. Right now, as it stands, he is QB1 for the Steelers, and that gives them a distinct Disadvantage, I would argue. If the Steelers see sense, and if Mike Tomlin sees sense, and if Arthur Smith sees sense, they'll put Justin Fields as the starter. He is a better quarterback at this stage in his career than Russell Wilson. It may be that he will never ever reach the heights that Russ did. Russ used to be a very good QB. He isn't anymore. He takes too many sacks. He plays hero ball. George Pickens there'll be a highlight reel for George Pickens this season, but it may well come at the cost of Mike Tomlin's winning record. I would have the Falcons winning this unless they see sense and start Fields.
Brian, you're chuckling away there. One of the things I like about the schedule this season, before we get to the Steelers, and something I came across just before we started broadcasting, Steelers have the third toughest schedule ranked by opponents' wins last season, which isn't always the most reliable metric, let's be honest, but it's an interesting place to start. But one of the things that's poxy, frankly, about the Steelers schedule, if you're in Pittsburgh, is they play all six of their in-division games in what is one of the toughest divisions in the NFL over the final 8 weeks of the season. So I didn't like last season, though. There were so many divisional matchups so early on in the schedule, and there was a lot even in week one. So it meant that some of the key rivalries were over and done with before there was it felt like there was anything to play for, or we were sure who was heading for playoff games. That's not the case this year, but it does set up some intriguing drama for later on in the season. Anyway, sorry, that's a sidebar here.
Connor, just throw another sidebar in before you go to Shane on this one. They also have the Chiefs on Christmas Day. Just throw that one in, 6 in. So there's 7 in the last 8 games, divisions, and a game against the Chiefs.
Lovely. Yeah, Shane, Steelers here, as Colin said, may see Justin Fields into action sooner rather than later, depending on how this one goes. It's not the easiest start to the season for them. It's one of 2 consecutive road games they play to open up.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well, of course, that we're going into this. There's a long season ahead. Russell Wilson could come into this and have a fantastic game, and I actually think he will. I think this game is one where he's going to kick ass, and then he drops off a cliff later on into the season.
Rematch of the 2011 Big Ten championship game for those who remember, where Russell did take down Kirk Cousins.
But I think it's interesting as well because, of course, the face against the Falcons is a sort of a bowl of 2 teams who have an embarrassment of mediocre riches at quarterback. There's too many. Who's going to play here? Who's going to play where? Of course, I guess the sense of quarterback controversy is stronger in Pittsburgh because there is genuinely a good argument for starting Russell Wilson and starting Justin Fields, and we don't know what way things will go throughout assuming the training camps in the summer and the preseason games. What I'm really looking forward to seeing here, though, is that Russell Wilson will have a bee in his bonnet, and you can tell he's going to come into this as storming against an Atlanta Falcons team who I don't think have shored up enough on defense to have a good first half of the season. As much as they bolstered their offense with the pick, or with the purchase of quarterback and pick for another quarterback, and the fact that it didn't pick our beloved hero Dallas Turner to fill up their defensive holes, you know, that gives opportunity for teams who are playing them in the first half of the year to try and tear them apart before they can really get their act together. And Russell Wilson is going to make use of that before coming against another team in week 3, week 4, week 5, and things start falling off a cliff. Come October, he's going to have a scare show, and then Justin Fields is going to come into that spot as well. So, look, it's going to become a talking point every week. Any situation that you have 2 quarterbacks where there is a good argument to play either or is going to become a conversation every week in every media outlet. It's going to be the same in Atlanta when Kirk Cousins has a bad game. I don't know how many primetimes games the Falcons are playing, but you can guarantee that they probably won't do so well in those, being Kirk Cousins. You know, that conversation is going to be strong there. It's going to be strong in New England. It's going to be strong in Pittsburgh, probably more than anywhere else. So, look, it's only 1 week. Enjoy if you're not a Steelers fan, if you're not a fan of the, try to enjoy the chaos, which is something we never really associate with the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, an organization where stability has always been key. And now they have these 2 quarterbacks who both have, I guess, good merit in terms of their selection. But as Colin outlined, the hero ball that Russell Wilson will play might work against the Falcons, won't work later on in the season.
No, Cardinals at Bills again features 2 teams with very intriguing storylines heading into this season. Cardinals, a team that, you know, are getting a lot more buzz, having drafted Marvin Harrison, you know, the most explosive playmaker available in the draft, in most people's opinion, to pair with Kyler Murray. They're a team that was plucky last season, talent poor, but competed in most games and did a lot better than a lot of people expected. Seemed to be very well coached. Jonathan Gannon doing a very good job in his first season there. The Bills, on the other hand, probably the second season in a row now, come in with a lot of question marks. And in some senses, one might suggest that those are unjustified, given they've been a model of consistency. Yeah, they haven't won it all, but they've managed to pile up the regular season wins, managed to put themselves into the right spot in the playoffs. Yeah, they didn't take down the Chiefs last year, but nobody else managed that either. You spoke to Matt Perino recently, who covers the Bills, and he was quietly confident that they'll go well again.
He was. When I talked to Matt, we were just kind of discussing there was a lot of moves made by the Bills this year. Obviously, salary cap issues pop up, and we talked about how teams have windows, and if you can't hit certain targets within those windows, at some point you need to start looking to kind of change things about, obviously because of salary cap concerns. So what Matt was talking about was that how this was, for a lot of Bills fans, it was an emotional offseason, given the number of kind of mainstay players who had to make a way out of the team. But what he did feel overall was that while the Bills may have to take some lumps this season, he feels they've really put themselves in a good place, for 25, 26. And look, when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen, it's, he's the kind of player, that quarterback that can make good receivers very good and, average receivers good. So you're always in with a chance with him there. But when you do look at the players the Bills have lost, I mean, I do think this season it is a legitimate question. There is a lot of kind of good players, and, we get to Stephon Diggs as well. He's gone, there's a bit of change there. But I think when you look at the Bills team, they still have quality there. They still have some, really, really good players that can make an impact. And then, as I say, you've got that quarterback who can just make players better and will always keep them in the run, and especially for the division. You mentioned the Cardinals. The Cardinals are in a bit of a rebuild here at the moment as well. They look like they're trying to get younger. I mean, you bring in Marvin Harrison Jr. Look, he is arguably the best player in the draft just gone. So for Kyler Murray, that's a really good piece to kind of start working off of. I mean, I expect the Bills to win this game. I think the Bills will be just a better team than the Cardinals. But again, how the Bills kind of find themselves going through the season, that'll be interesting to see how these big changes really affect them. And will it be down the road when they really benefit, or will they be able to just keep going and doing what they're doing this season?
Right, conscious that we have an awful lot of games to get through, and we don't want to spend the entire night. I'm sure people have other things to do, so we might just kind of pick up the pace a little bit. I'll go off with Titans at Bears, which is the final game of our first segment here. An interesting one. I think Bears have kind of in the unusual position as far as Bears fans are concerned, where they're generally seen as having made a lot of the right moves during the offseason, set Caleb Williams, their presumptive franchise quarterback, up for success in the best way that they possibly could have done, really, given the options available to them. Catching Roma Dunze after that Michael Penix move by the Falcons paved the way for them to grab him as a receiver, pairing him with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, obviously, and they picked up Gerald Everett alongside Cole Kmet to bulk up those multiple tight end sets that Shane Waldron, their new offensive coordinator, loves to deploy and has had a lot of success with in previous jurisdictions, particularly in Seattle. But from a Titans perspective, I think they're also a team that's made a lot of the right moves if they do decide to develop Will Levis as the quarterback, and if he develops into something that's worth having in the quarterback position. Bringing in Calvin Ridley, they got DeAndre Hopkins there, and they look like, and they've obviously taken Tony Pollard as well. They look like they've put him in a good position to succeed, and that could be very intriguing to watch. Having said that, after that 4-touchdown explosion in his debut by Levis, there were only 4 touchdowns in the remaining 8 games of the season. Titans did not go well, bar the one kind of upset win against the Dolphins down the stretch. They've a lot to think about heading into this season. I don't think expectations are particularly high, which is in stark contrast to the situation in Chicago, where despite having a rookie quarterback, a lot of people penciling the Bears in to get to the playoffs, even though they got the Packers and the Lions standing in front of them in the NFC North. But this is going to be a good matchup. Bears 4.5-point favorites at home. Not the hardest start to a schedule that they could have possibly imagined, and probably a good one for Caleb to introduce himself to a very expectant and vociferous home crowd in Soldier Field for as long as Soldier Field is the Bears stadium, depending on what happens with their planning there. But that brings us to the end of our first segment of this schedule special at the Irish NFL Show. Well, let's take a look at the next segment of the schedule here in our schedule special on the Irish NFL show. Patriots at Bengals, where Bengals heavy favourites there, Shane, expecting Joe Burrow back and expecting to get the train back on the rails, but not necessarily all the pieces in place there, because we see Brian Callahan obviously getting a well-deserved head coaching shot elsewhere, having left the fold. We saw how that affected the Eagles very badly last year when you lose a much-loved and very highly rated offensive coordinator. Bengals will hope that doesn't happen, because they want Joey B back and in the sort of form that he was before he got injured.
Yeah, I think it was interesting the importance of their overall offensive talent, and as well as how the team was being coached last year when Jake Browning stepped in, and they were still a pretty good team. A lot of times, last year was kind of the year of the backup, but we saw there were many instances where as soon as the backup quarterback came in, things started falling apart. That said, the Cincinnati Bengals' hopes for the Super Bowl do rest on the man they are paying a lot of money to, which is Joe Burrow. This is the big Joe Burrow comeback game, and it's very important for them to really get off the ground. Thankfully for them, they have a relatively easy matchup against a Patriots team who will still be finding their feet with a rookie head coach, with a quarterback situation where we're still not sure of. So from the Bengals' point of view, look, they've made moves. They've shored up their offensive line. I think signing Trent Brown from the Patriots. They got Mike Gesicki as journeyman tight end, who I think are decent additions. They bolstered up in the draft. So it all depends on how that really works in, I guess, in the preseason, where of course Joe Burrow got injured last season as well. So hopefully, I think that's a big period where Bengals fans will be hoping that they don't end up kind of hurting themselves before they even get started. So look, this is the easy game for them, really. And I don't want to knock down the Patriots' chance too much, but this is the kind of nice, easy one to warm up in before they have to go and play against the Chiefs in Arrowhead in week 2. And that is where their mind is going to be. So again, it's up to Joe Burrow really to prove that he's fit, to prove that he's sharp, and to prove that he doesn't make too many mistakes. I've said it before that generally with Joe Burrow, it doesn't really matter if he throws interceptions, because generally he can make up for it with his talent. We're not quite sure what way the offensive line and the wide receiver group are working together, and their options in the running game as well may have taken a step back than the Super Bowl, the team that won the AFC Championship a couple of seasons ago. So that'll be interesting to watch. Just very quickly, from a Patriots point of view, if the Patriots have not gone with the in vogue decision, they've gone with a defensive head coach. They're obviously quite happy with their defenders, because they haven't really upgraded much. They're still sitting in a lot of cap space they aren't spending, and they've used pretty much all of 7 of their 8 draft picks on the offense. So forget about what the offense is going to do from a Patriots point of view here, because they're all still learning their trade. They're still learning the ropes. We can't really judge what they're going to do or their potential until October. But Gerard Mayo, he was in the building. He's a defensive head coach. This is a very tough task against Joe Burrow. That's what we need to watch, because if the Patriots are basically putting their egg in the defensive basket and saying, look, that is where our strengths lie, that's where we're going to build on and hope that the offense, we can create something out of the young talent we have, then fine. It's on Gerard Mayo now to show that he has the ability to plan and the ability to shut things down. Because if Joe Burrow is let win by 20, 30 points, question marks will start coming as the wisdom of going with such a defensive system once again.
Brian, we mentioned that there are not an awful lot of divisional matchups in these first round of games. One of the ones that does crop up, and it's a nice one, is Texans at Colts.
Yeah, and it'd be good to see Anthony Richardson back as quarterback for the Colts. He's kind of a forgotten man, I suppose, over the course of the last year, because of the nature of him getting injured so early in the season. And it's more so about CJ Stroud and this Texans team, who you'd have to argue really going to be taking the best foot forward in this offseason. They bring in Stephon Diggs, and whilst he has his difficulties at times, but I think they'll get a player in there that will be eager to make a point to the Bills, but, in terms of what it could have been if they had kept hold of him. And obviously then he's going to go in there and he's probably recognised this team is very much kind of a dark horse within the AFC. They've done some nice things. Daniel Hunter, a big free agency acquisition, comes in, done some nice things in the draft. But I think it's more about the expectations for the team. They've had such a great year, an opening season for a new quarterback, a new head coach, and sometimes it can tail off slightly in the second season. I think it's about managing the expectations. They're rightly favourites for this division. And this division, I do think will be a lot more competitive this year. I think the Titans, as you touched on, have done some nice things. It'd be interesting to see what Colts team we see next season. Like, bear in mind, they played each other, I think it was week 16 on a Saturday night, and they were one play away from essentially winning the division when the player, I think it was Gannon dropped the ball from a Gardner Minshew pass. Like the Colts will probably quietly fancy themselves to come back and have another good season. But for me, it's all about the Texans and how they start the season, because they do have a nice run of it if they can get past the opening few games.
Colin, I remember in the off-season last year, we talked about sliding doors moments, and we didn't spend any time talking about the Davis Mills 2-point conversion that ended up putting the Texans in the second pick in the draft, which obviously ended up being CJ Stroud. And that may have paved the way for Caleb Williams to go to the Bears and change the direction potentially of two franchises. But this is as quick a rebuild as I think anyone covering the NFL can ever remember, where a team goes from, yeah, it's a tough situation for a rookie quarterback, and it's a tough situation for a rookie head coach, and a tough situation for an offensive coordinator. This year, people were talking about them picking up the 1 or 2 players necessary to turn them into legitimate Super Bowl contenders. Are they there?
They're close. They are very, very close. I think DeMeco Ryans is an incredible motivator, and the way his players respond to him is phenomenal. I think everyone is shocked, particularly me, because I've had my rants about the Texans in the years past, but I didn't have one last off season because they were going in the right direction. I think they treated obviously their 2 previous head coaches terribly, but in Ryans and in Stroud in particular, I mean, outside of the proven talent, it's difficult to imagine a better QB situation because they have him on a cost control contract for another 4 years, and I can see.
And Colin, we have joked in the past about the proliferation of NFL podcasts, but one of the clips that we were all pouring over the last couple of days is CJ Stroud and Micah Parsons' podcast, where they're picking their best offensive lineup against their best defensive lineup for one play, and it's jaw-dropping to watch CJ Stroud break down plays and positions and players, and the depth of his knowledge already at such a young age is scary. It's really, really seriously impressive to watch.
Yeah, he's not doing the guys behind the S2 test any favors, is he? Because this was supposed to be the test that measured the intellect, and he, week after week, clip after clip, game after game, whether it's on the field or off the field, he has proven that wrong. The other thing about him is he seems a very normal, nice human being. Even like where they aren't absolute lunatics. A lot of, say, franchise NFL QBs, you wouldn't want to go for a pint with them because they just are so intense, and they probably wouldn't want to go for a pint. Whereas Stroud, he's a very kind of normal individual until he gets on a football field, and then he is simply sensational. And I'm intrigued to see how it goes. The Diggs thing is the dice roll that could go really well, could not, but with DeMeco there and with him having essentially now playing for a contract in his future in the league, that is one to keep an eye on. But there's talk a lot of the time, and Colin Cowherd famously tipped Drew Lock for the MVP in his second season a few years ago. I think the people saying that Stroud could win it are not nearly as delusional. I can see an argument for that.
No, we got a Florida Derby next up as the Jags take the relatively short trip from Jacksonville to Miami to take on the Dolphins. Dolphins typically make the most of the advantage that they have at this time of year, where it's scorchio in Miami and they have the opposition stewing on the sideline in the direct sunlight. Not necessarily the biggest advantage when you're taking on your Florida neighbors, who are also well used to that heat. So they won't necessarily thank the schedule makers. They'd like the cold weather team rocking in to be roasted on the sideline. That's not the case this time around. Both teams started well and finished poorly last season. The Jaguars particularly so. They're 8-3 at one point and looked an absolute lock to make the playoffs, and then fell off a cliff. The Dolphins, with their well-publicized flat track bully moniker, which they did very little to shift in the way that they finished the season, getting kind of mollywopped by the Bills in the final game to lose the divisional title, and then going to the Chiefs, where they've kind of surrendered fairly meekly in the end.
Yeah, I mean, and you said it at times last season, early on, the Dolphins looked electric. Some of the points they were putting up was amazing. I think they did suffer a few injuries, which kind of caused problems for them. But again, you say it just didn't finish well. And as for the Jags, I think they probably would have thought the division would have been something that they would have got there last season. Nobody saw the Texans coming the way they did, and as you say, then it just ended really badly. But again, look, you've a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, and I think they're working to kind of put pieces around him. Obviously, Calvin Ridley went, but they brought in Gabe Davis. They brought in Mitch Morse there at center, and they drafted Brian Thomas Jr. So it looks like they're going to kind of bulk up there a bit and try and give Trevor Lawrence a bit more ammunition, because things didn't go ideally the way he would have wanted at that second half of the season last year. And then Miami, I think they do have a few players back, but they've lost a few players now. So it's going to be interesting to see what way that works. Obviously, they lose Christian Wilkins on defense. They lose Robert Hunt, guard, Xavier Howard on defense. So it'll be interesting to see what way they kind of come back. But again, Mike McDaniel he's a really good head coach. He can draft up or draw up some really, really good plays. I think they brought Odell Beckham in to kind of bulk up there on the offense. So I think this will be a good game. I think both teams will probably, like last season, will probably start off well and look good. Again, whether or not they can carry it through to the end, we'll be seeing. I think the Jags will have a tough time now with the Texans, which is something probably nobody predicted last season. But now we look at how that Texans team has developed. I think the Dolphins probably might be a little too strong for the Jags. But again, look, it'll be interesting to say. As you say, there's no... The Dolphins do usually count on that heat advantage early in the season, and they won't have that there now. So these two teams, it could be a good high-scoring game, which I think the Dolphins may be good enough just to kind of squeak through.
Shane, the Saints host the Panthers in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. It's another divisional clash, one of the few, as we were saying, in this first week of games. And it's the way it's looking right now, the two backmarkers in the mosh pit of mediocrity, which is the NFC South. Chance for Bryce Young's career redemption arc to start. It's terrible, sorry, to be writing off a player in only the second year of his NFL career after all the issues that there have been in Carolina. But he'll be very keen to put 2023-24 behind him and start with a win. It's not the easiest place to go to do that, though.
Well, sorry, just on what you're saying about Bryce Young, I don't really think people are really writing off Bryce Young as much as they're writing off the Panthers organization, and that it's just an unfortunate fact about the situation he is landing himself in. And fair play to the Bears for making that trade. They've saved Caleb Williams from having a similar fate. I think this is a matchup between two teams who really need the good start. What I'm interested in seeing is, of course, like the Panthers are a greater unknown coming into this. I think. We sat here and we were having chats about this time last year. We were expecting much more from the Saints than we got. And I'm not quite sure what they've done really to, I guess, improve their chances. I know in the draft they kind of did things to improve their offensive line, which is a clear area where they needed improving. But I can't sit here and say that Derek Carr and co are gonna light it up, which is interesting considering I think I'm right in saying that they're due to play a Monday Night Football game against the Chiefs in Arrowhead, which I thought was a weird selection for a primetime game. Maybe people are expecting something greater, especially from him coming into this season. But I think this is a good chance. This is a very good chance for the Panthers. I'm not expecting the Panthers to flop as much as they did last season. I think Bryce Young is going to obviously have a bit more time to, I guess, meditate and reflect on what was a very turbulent first season. And as much as David Tepper, who is the real problem child of the Carolina Panthers, is still in situ, there is a real opportunity for the team to improve. So as much as New Orleans is a difficult place to go, I reckon the Panthers have a good chance here. What I'm really interested in seeing, though, is just the mentality of Bryce Young coming into this. How he composed himself in the podium in the week beforehand, how he acts on the field as well. Because at the end of last season, you could just tell he was just a bit dejected. All of the great hope and glory that the NFL was. It was this great thing in a mountain, and he comes into it and he gets absolutely beaten up by it. Winning 2 games, and people saying they were even fortunate to get those 2 games. This is a fresh start. The whole cliche of everyone is all starting at the same level. We're all in the race for the Super Bowl, which isn't, of course, true in reality. You can guarantee he's still going to play into that and head into this. So, look, the first half of that game, if we're watching on Red Zone, keeping an eye on Bryce Young and just the poise and the body language of how he is on the field. That's the thing probably going to be the most interesting thing to watch out in this game, because I don't think either of these guys are really in a playoff race.
Brian, Vikings at Giants. The Giants start this season against two rookie quarterbacks in a row. They've JJ McCarthy obviously in week 1 against the Vikings, and they've Jaden Daniels week 2 against the Commanders. Already they look like critical games for this Giants organization.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think it'll be down to Joe Shane and Brian Dable very early on. I mean, the egg on the face scenario is that they end up 0-2 and they lose to two rookies. We're working on the assumption that both rookies win out in terms of winning the position. I think Jaden Daniels is probably the lock of the two. JJ McCarthy obviously will have to prove it come training camp. I think Sam Darnold was brought in for that reason. If they don't feel comfortable with the rookie, I think they can go with Darnold for a year. But on the basis that the two rookies are starting, the Giants need, it's not a case of playing, like, it's a strong Vikings team, but they're at home and they're going up against a rookie quarterback. They brought in a new defensive coordinator. They make the Brian Burns trade. They've got a lot of ammunition on defense this year. You would expect them to find a way to navigate victories, but it's not a given. And I think if they were to lose 2 games already, then the pressure ultimately would be on Dable. And as Shane's alluded to earlier, the shadow of Bill Belichick will only grow greater and greater over the course of the season in the background if it isn't a successful season for Dable, because inevitably John Mara can't help himself when it comes to the love affair and relationship he has with Bill Belichick. So very, very early to be having that conversation, but they really do need to get off to a fast start. And I think it's kind of, maybe in a way, sometimes the scheduling helps you. I think in this instance, it probably does help that they're going up against rookie quarterbacks, but still not a given, because they're not as if we're stacked with players of our own right.
Colin, you of course have the inside Minnesota line, and you're always pretty close to the heartbeat of what Vikings fans are thinking. And what is the feeling on this as an opener for JJ McCarthy? Because there's a lot of people were saying in the offseason, this is a great landing spot for a QB. You got the right coach, you got a really good set of weapons around a rookie quarterback. You've also got that mean, lean Brian Flores defense now with the addition of Dallas Turner, obviously Danielle Hunter out the exit door, but they seem to have drafted well. They seem to have set up well during the offseason with the free agent moves that they made. I thought, frankly, they won the trade with the Packers on Aaron Jones. I think they'll have been delighted to pick that one up. I think that's a downgrade for the Packers with Josh Jacobs, and Vikings getting the upside there.
There seems to be, understandably, I think, a lot of optimism on the ground in Minnesota. And I think that I don't, they'll probably be the illusion of the competition, but I think that the fan pressure will be for JJ. They want him to start, and I think there'll be enormous disappointment. I think it would be great for the Giants if he didn't start, because I think the atmosphere in that stadium, and it can be electric, like it really can, will be right up there if he starts. It will be very much seen as kind of the new era. There's obviously the question around Justin Jefferson and when they are going to get that contract done. So that is something to keep an eye on, and what he's going to end up being paid. We could be looking at north of 35 million at this point. Brian says the question, the specter of Bill Belichick might be the one that hangs over the Giants. I would say the specter of Dak Prescott might be what exists, because the Giants are going to be looking for a new quarterback at the end of the season. I can tell you that. It's not going to be Daniel Jones. It's not going to be Drew Lock who's starting in September 2025. Are you telling me that John Mara would not love to have one over Jerry Jones, and that he wouldn't be prepared to make that Prescott the highest paid player in the league? I think the Dak sweepstakes are going to be absolutely fascinating this time next year.
All right, Bright, that brings us to the end of our second segment of the first look at the 2024 schedule and the week 1 games. Well, let's pick it up in the third section of our 2024 opening week of games preview, since the schedule release was made just earlier on this morning, and we're looking at a Raiders-Chargers matchup, which is Jim Harbaugh's first back in the NFL, of course. Hosting a bitter divisional rival and an interesting matchup that is too. Noel, the Chargers, as a lot of people expected, contrary to what a lot of people expected, didn't go for a receiver in the first round of the draft. They picked up Joe Alt, who was the consensus best available offensive lineman and considered the outstanding prospect available at that position. That's clearly a move aimed at making life a little bit easier for Justin Herbert. But not an awful lot of weapons, or not an awful lot of expected fireworks for the Chargers at the same time. It's looking like it's going to be quite a different Los Angeles Chargers from what we've been used to in previous seasons.
Yeah, it looks like it could be the start of a little bit of a rebuild. Obviously, you lose Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Austin Eckler is gone as well. So there's a lot of mainstays who have been there for a long time, who are kind of ingrained in the Chargers, and kind of moving them on signals that things are changing. Obviously, they bring in Gus Edwards, that running back, who's a really good player. Jim Harbaugh, unfortunately for him, these are talking about JJ McCarthy there, the greatest quarterback in the draft for Jim. He's not got him, unfortunately. He's just stuck with Justin Herbert, but I mean, I think he'll be okay with that. But I mean, you mentioned he brings in Joe Alt, who obviously is more, well, as you say, consensus, the top tackle in the draft, and I think is a good solid move, and it kind of shows that they're looking to build, and obviously they just felt that getting the trenches sorted in front of Justin Herbert was the best way to go. They bring Ladd McConkey in the second round because they do need that firepower, given the players I've mentioned who have gone. But it is going to be interesting to see how they go. Obviously, Greg Roman is in as offensive coordinator now. There's, the ball gets run a lot when Greg is there. So we're going to see how that kind of develops and what kind of game plan they do. But I mean, it'll just be interesting to see how the Chargers kind of develop and how they build this going forward. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh has a huge reputation. He was a very sought after head coach. I know I was kind of clamoring for him for the Bears. I was hoping it would work out that way. Unfortunately not, but he is a really good head coach, and we'll just kind of see how this develops. In terms of the Raiders, they're a very interesting one as well, because obviously going into the draft, you really feel like they're going to be one of those teams that are going to try and jump up to get themselves a quarterback. It doesn't work out in the end, so they bring in Gardner Minshew. They have Aiden O'Connell, so who is going to be the starting quarterback there. That'll be interesting to see. They brought Brock Bowers in, who can, complement Devontae Adams there. So whoever is the starting quarterback will have options. But again, they lose Josh Jacobs at running back. So we'll kind of see how things develop as well. So I think this could be an interesting game with two teams where there are question marks, a lot of question marks in the Chargers. And this is what I love about the first week of the season, because you just start to try and get a picture in your head of how these teams are going to actually look and develop. And, the Chargers are one team that, it'll be really interesting to see how that actually does start to take fold.
Colm, your Broncos taking on the Seahawks for their opener. Doesn't seem like that long ago that this would have been a Russ revenge game, but that ship has well and truly sailed.
Yeah, definitely a groan when I saw this, because the Seahawks have been or kryptonite both on and off the field, and I suppose this is, you've got a new head coach in Seattle, and they are looking. Geno is going to be the starter there. But Geno's contract, I suppose, was somewhat similar to Daniel Jones. So Geno's in a real kind of prove it year at this point again. And that will be fascinating to see how that goes. They have been terrible on defense for years now. So bringing in Mike McDonald should make a difference there. Being at home should make a difference. I think the Broncos roster looks pretty ropey to me. If the Broncos are to have hope in this, I would say it is that Sean Payton might be able to take advantage of a rookie head coach. But McDonald has been around. He was with Harbaugh in Michigan. He was with the other Harbaugh brother with the Ravens. But it's a very tough place to go for a rookie QB. So the only thing worse than, I suppose, going to Seattle with a rookie QB making his NFL debut against the 12th man would be going to Seattle on the opening day with Zach Wilson at QB. So luckily the Broncos have both of those options available to them. I can't wait to see what will happen. But I think for me, the Broncos this year, it's about performance and trajectory rather than the number of games won realistically.
Commanders at Bucks, Brian. I'm in two minds about this one as to whether it's a relatively tame start for Daniels for his first game as quarterback for the Commanders, or putative first game, or whether the Bucks are precisely the team you don't want to play, where there might be a little bit of excitement or expectation that he could win this one, and yet at the same time the Bucks are a canny team, a playoff team that's been around the block, proven to be able to win games.
Yeah, and a couple of months ago they'd won the offseason, and they brought back Baker Mayfield and they brought back Mike Evans, and Winfield has now got his contract. Obviously, he was tagged with a view to signing a long-term contract, and everyone's saying this team is going in the right direction. I think the Commanders, bearing in mind where they are as a team, they're evolving. A new quarterback. You got Cliff Kingsbury coming in as the offensive coordinator, and Dan Quinn back as a head coach in the league, essentially bringing a large part of the Cowboys group with him in terms of on the offensive line. I think they'll quite advance themselves. I think if you're looking at a game in which you want to start the season, I said it a couple of years ago when the Giants at the column, we did a show during June, and we were kind of similar. We're reflecting on who you want as a week one potential shock on the cards, and the Giants went to Tennessee and shocked them. I think the Commanders would be looking at this as a good opportunity for a young quarterback going in there, not the most daunting of road games. I think they'll give the Bucks something to think about. I think this is one of those games. It's a sneaky type of game for week one where you could see a potential shock.
Interesting. Right. Cowboys at Browns, Shane. That's a tough road game for the Cowboys to start the season, and I know Stephen A. Smith will be loving it. What do you think?
Which stage of the Cowboys cycle are we in now? Isn't there always a stage where at the start of the season there's a great hope, but we're not quite sure what happens? They peak somehow in the middle. There's maybe a loss to the 49ers thrown in there somewhere, which I think is in one of the Sunday night games, and then something happens with them in the playoffs. And there isn't really much telling any of us that it's going to be any different this year, or at least not any better this year. Potential to be worse, because the question marks around Dak Prescott. You're not quite sure how much he's going to play. You're not quite sure how the other offensive talent is going to play. They need to lock in CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons and a few other guys. The Cowboys have made very, very few acquisitions. The only thing they've done is they've brought back Ezekiel Elliott, and this is a player who I thought was criminally underused in New England, is now going to come back to the Dallas Cowboys, have one great game, and be criminally underused for the rest of the season. But look, it's going to be very, for the Cowboys, it's going to be a very difficult season, and Mike McCarthy. So the head coach there he himself has a bit of a prove-it season before more uncertainty comes to hit the franchise further on, because I'm not quite sure if they haven't sorted out Dak Prescott by now. You have to consider that this is the start of the end of that era in Dallas. From the Cleveland point of view, I think they still have pretty good confidence from last season. Their defense was incredibly strong. They managed to play through many different quarterbacks. The big thing that they're missing is a run game. So it's really about how they try to replace the absence of Nick Chubb, who I think is still going to be recovering from injuries. And even if he does come back from all the surgeries he's had, he's not going to be the player he was before he got wheeled off against the Steelers last year. They brought in Dante Foreman and Nyheim Hines to kind of bolster that running attack. So it gives them a chance to test it out against a defense which traditionally has been one of the most difficult run defense to try and negotiate. But you mentioned how much Stephen A. Smith is going to love it. This is a game that the Cowboys could very easily lose, and then the questions start coming on. And you've all the things in the background. This Jerry Jones 10-part Netflix series that's coming in. The question marks around the quarterback, question marks around the head coach, question marks about just about everything in typical Dallas Cowboys style, which is a shame because they really have the talent to win the Super Bowl. They just don't have the organization.
Noel, on the Brown side of the equation, though, Shane has talked about how the questions could build very quickly and talked about could this be the beginning of the end of the Dak Prescott era. We're waiting for the end of the beginning of the Deshaun Watson era, and this might not necessarily go the way the Browns wanted to.
No, I think people are starting to look at this trade now and realize it was just not the kind of trade they should have been making. It's gone wrong off the field. It's gone wrong on the field. It's just something that just hasn't panned out. I mean, you look at last season when he was injured, they brought a player in off the sofa and they were still winning games. So I think they're probably just going to try and see this contract out now and cut their losses from there. But they still have a good team. And look, if he comes back this season And if for whatever reason things just kind of click for him, we know he is a quarterback who does have a lot of talent. We haven't seen it in a while, but you know, it's in there somewhere. If it does come back, this could be a scary team. And you know, who knows? Things change very, very quickly in the NFL. You know, they could be 6 months from now or a year from now, we could be looking at the trade and saying, oh, well, it came good in the end. Although I don't know if it'll still be worth what they've gone through. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see week one, how he comes in and if he starts to become the quarterback they thought they were getting or the quarterback he seems to have drifted into over the last couple of years.
One of the revenge games that we have coming up in this slate column is Rams at Lions, you know, rematch of the divisional round game from the playoffs, which the Lions won to much fanfare in their stadium. And what a raucous occasion that was. It really has been a year or 12 months in which the sun has shone on Detroit, as we saw again during the draft celebrations as well. Is this more the same now that Jared Goff has gotten paid, or will the Rams wipe their eye?
It's an interesting one again to open the season, and I think the Rams there won't be obviously the emotion that we saw for the playoff game, but equally you don't have Aaron Donald, and Aaron Donald was one of the great defensive players to play the game in this era. And how do you go about replacing him? The Rams took an interesting approach. They brought in two guys who they believe can complement each other, but they, you know, how that will work in reality, we will have to see. Matthew Stafford and his wife were very vocal after the playoff loss about how he felt disrespected. I don't know what he wasn't booed before the game or anything like that, but understandably he wasn't exactly warmly welcomed during the game.
I have to say, like, I don't know what the guy expected. Like, it's, you know, you made your decision, you left and you went and won your Super Bowl. That was your choice. Like, you want them to bring you back in and hoist you shoulder high. Like, it's a different team now, different guy leading them, and you know, you got what you deserved.
Yeah, exactly. I would concur. I think maybe he feels a little bit like, you know, the excitement in Detroit is palpable, and he probably felt a little bit like it was going to continue to be the factory of sadness, and that if you know that the next time he went back there would be for a regular season game where the Lions were having maybe 2 or 3 wins, and they would, you know, be, oh, remember how great things were under Matthew. But that isn't the case, and I think having Ben Johnson come back, who knows how long that lasts. I don't believe for a second that teams will look at what happened with the Commanders and think, oh, we might not want him as our head coach. I think the Commanders have ensured that everyone looked at that and went, oh, that's those guys, and everything that has happened in the aftermath in the months since
I think
the
fact that he walked away from the Commanders might make him even more desirable as a head coach. He's even smarter than we thought he was.
Yes, I think that's a very fair point. And I'm excited to see what they continue to do. I think some of the players that they took last year should continue to develop and improve. I do expect this will be another hard-fought game. I think it'll be a very close game, but I think Dan Campbell, he made mistakes at the end of last season. I still think he was okay to go for it. To me, we could have that debate again. To me, the bigger issue was afterwards in the locker room, where he kind of said to the guys that could be it. And he has now got to turn around and pick those same players up. But I think Ben Johnson staying on will help with that. And I expect the Lions to have another very, very good season.
Shane, what's your view? The Lions, in some people's estimation, are going to go one step further. I've already seen predictions that they'll make the championship game and indeed make the Super Bowl, make the championship game again and make the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, there's only so long you can ride on emotion. I think at some point there has to be a sense of planning. Look, I do, as much as I sometimes hammer on Dan Campbell and some of his decision making, the fact he's always about grit and going for it and trusting his guys and doing the stupid thing because every now and again it might actually work. That is his brand, and that is what has carried Detroit out of the factory sadness period. And look, I can't begrudge them for that. And there are 32 teams. There's obviously going to be 32 different ways of doing it, and that's their way. But you have to realize now we're at a position where Jarekov has gotten his money. I think he's the second or third highest paid in the average per year. Quarterback, I think $55 million average per year now he's at. So they're locking that in. They have to come to a radius now, or a stage now where it's not about, they're not on the rise anymore. They're not on a wave of emotion. They're not the guys everybody loves anymore. The Hard Knocks is a couple of years behind now. They went on their playoff run and should have made the Super Bowl against a team that nobody wanted to make it, which in the 49ers, and everyone kind of saw them mess things up in the NFC Championship game. They need to get down to business, and I think that makes them more vulnerable against a Rams team that, yes, they've lost Aaron Donald, and they're still obviously finding their feet in what was quite a quick rebuild last season. And they're in a situation where they are going to be trying to challenge the NFC West, but probably won't. But I think Matt Stafford, seeing Goff go well in Detroit, and after the loss last year, the emotion is going to be on their side more than it is in Detroit, and I think that makes the Rams slight favorites for this game. And Detroit, as we go into the season, they're gonna pull out some fantastic wins. Their way of doing things is gonna create headlines and have people loving them. They're gonna go for a 2-point conversion when they're only 1 point down and clinch a game against the Packers or somebody like that. But when you're against methodical, smart teams like the Rams, like Sean McVay, and all the people around there who have drafted exquisitely well in the last couple of years, at some point, the people with the brains are going to unpick the people with the brawn.
All right, Brian, just to wrap it up for this segment, we have what I heard somebody describe as a revenge game. I thought that was a bit of a stretch, and then I remembered who's actually playing in it. Like, this would be an Aaron Rodgers revenge game for all those years ago when the 49ers overlooked him with the number 1 overall pick and took Alex Smith. I thought it's entirely possible that, given the chips that this guy harbors on his shoulder, he actually does view it as a revenge game all those years later. It's Rodgers again on Monday night. It's revenge for what happened on Monday Night Football last year. It's Rodgers on grass this time, crucially. So hopefully his Achilles, having recovered from the injury he suffered after 4 snaps this time last year, will be ready to go. For the Jets, I know there's such hope in New York after such despair, and I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but the guy is turning 41 later this season, coming off a very serious injury. Everybody's expectations are leveraged in the direction of he rolls back the years and we get MVP caliber Aaron Rodgers, or close enough to it, to take a talented offense and an incredible defense all the way. But it's much more likely, the way I see this, that he's like every other quarterback we've ever seen and he falls off a cliff, like Roethlisberger did, like Ryan did, like Manning did, like, give it a name, like everybody else did as they got to that age.
I think the media are enamored with the Jets now, whether it's a good story or a bad story. They've been, the NFL scheduling has essentially run it back from last year. What have they got, 6 or 7 games? I can't recall the exact number in terms of prime time games. And they've essentially gone back again to week 1. Let's put Aaron Rodgers back out there. I think the interesting they're going to know.
End up flexing like an Instagram or fitness influencer the way this is going to go.
Yeah. So they have 6 primetime games and another standalone game in London. And I think they're all before week 11 or week 12. They're all in the first half of the season.
Well, there we go. So the expectation for this Jets team is, and you can argue rightly so, is that they will come back because they had all the attributes to go and have a real strong push this year. I think the division has kind of, I suppose, tailed off slightly in terms of what the Bills have done this offseason. I think the Jets should be rightly favourites for the division. They've done some nice things outside the quarterback situation. We spoke, funny enough, Connor, about the fact that the game is, for me, it's purposely the one that they wanted to give him because it's on grass. It's a nice evening out in Cali. The likelihood of him getting injured in week 1 won't be there. And but they got to go on the road then in week 2 to Tennessee before they kick off their home games against the Patriots. It's a difficult start. I mean, we're talking about a team where, maybe the 49ers have a Super Bowl hangover, but they don't kind of strike me as that team. I think Kyle Shanahan would essentially recognize they were a couple of plays away from winning the Super Bowl last year. They'd be heavy favourites to be returning as NFC champions. And I think this is a bad spot for the Jets to start the season and for Aaron Rodgers to kind of kickstart his career with the Jets.
Right, that is the end of our look at the week 1 games, our early look at the week 1 games post the schedule announcement on the Irish NFL Show. For our final segment, we're going to look ahead to some of the international games coming up now that schedule has been finalised. We start with the 6th of October clash between the Jets and the Vikings at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Shane, you got a rookie quarterback in JJ McCarthy likely to be starting against the oldest quarterback in the league in Aaron Rodgers, which, fingers crossed he's still upright and fit and playing come that stage of the season, which isn't a given considering what we saw this time last year. But it's a nice matchup for fans of both sides. A lot of Jets fans in particular on this side of the Atlantic could be very excited to see Rodgers and to see the Jets come into town.
Yeah, and it's important as well to mention that the Jets have expanded into Ireland. So, of course, they are going to be expanding their involvement in this market as well. And I'm sure there will be plenty of Jets fans who will be excited by that. And they will capitalize on that excitement and sort of expand the green or to the colour green that will be in Tottenham in October. In terms of what's happening on the field, like this is coming at a very crucial point for Aaron Rodgers' progress in what could be his final season. You outlined there how difficult it is to play so well at this age, and considering he's coming back off an injury which kept him out for a season, there is nothing guaranteed with Aaron Rodgers. And the Jets were very difficult for first section with their scheduling, not only in terms of the opponents they're facing, but in among all those primetime games, there are two Thursday night games. They have to go to London. There's a lot going on there in that first thing. Plus, all the media circus that will come around, their games. The fact that we mentioned the media are enamored with them. They've got 6 primetime games, which is tied with the Cowboys and somebody else for the most. They are the kind of the drama around them is very much going to be the flavor of the month coming into October. So this is going to be a crucial game. It's not like they're just. These are two teams who are coming over there with not much to play for, who are just playing out in front of fans just to get out in the London sunshine. This is going to be crucial. And on the Vikings' point of view as well, all of these first-round draft picks who will be starting, which I expect JJ McCarthy will, which I expect Caleb Williams will, by the time we get to the following week in Tottenham as well. And I hope Drake May will by the time we get to the Patriots in Wembley. All those guys, usually, if you're starting from the start of the season, you can be forgiven in September for being shaky, for learning the ropes, whatever. I know there's always an immediate pressure to try and get these guys as good as possible now. And CJ Stroud obviously checked the box there, but there's a lot of great examples of when quarterbacks were given time, and because they were given time, they got better. So with JJ McCarthy, this is coming at a crucial point where September is over. They've played, I think, 4 games by the time we get here. They need to see that the quarterback whispers on the Minnesota Vikings sideline are starting to work. But one thing I'm really interested in seeing a Brian Flores all-out blitz defense go after Aaron Rodgers. I think that's going to be a great thing to watch. And it's worth remembering as well that the surface in Tottenham isn't grass. It's going to be tough. So I don't want to curse it. I'm not saying anything is going to happen, but there is a half-decent chance that Aaron Rodgers could be 4 snaps into this game as well.
Jesus, you don't put that out into the universe. Aaron Rodgers will be coming after us now. But Brian, there is a scenario in which Aaron Rodgers might have escaped worse punishment given how that Jets offensive line performed last year. And that's, one of the big questions heading into these games. By this stage of the season, we'll know after a couple of games whether it's actually up to the rigors of protecting him for the season ahead. And we'll also start to see how that Brian Flores defense is going to go in year 2, how the rookie Dallas Turner, as we mentioned, is going to slot in there, and how JJ McCarthy is warming into the role with the quarterback whisperer Kevin O'Connell at his side. A lot of confidence in how that relationship will pan out, and I'm actually really looking forward to seeing that in London.
Yeah, I have to say the NFL, and I know we always recognise it's early, and we look at these games and we think these are going to be fantastic games, and come that particular point in the season, it doesn't transpire that way. But I think right now you would have to say the NFL have done a good thing this year in terms of the games in which they've selected. In terms of the Jets, you touched on the offensive line. Like, we were clamouring, I suppose, on the night that they were going to take Brock Bowers, and a lot of people were, but the sensible decision was the right thing, which was to take an offensive line and rebuild and retool his offensive line. And Joe Douglas has been at this offensive line for 3 years now, trying to put this right. And unfortunately, last year they were ravished by injuries, even thereafter with the Aaron Rodgers, and didn't help Zach Wilson in any way, shape or form, albeit he wasn't playing very well himself. But this will be the piece, because if Aaron Rodgers is to be successful this year, ultimately it's going to come down to how well this offensive line plays, and they're going to be have a tough that day. Shane's alluded to Brian Flores, like they brought in Greenair from the Texans, one again another marquee free agency acquisition, who had a really strong season last year. They've retooled it defensively. So as much as we're excited about seeing offensive players on both sides of the ball, ultimately it could come down to which defense on the day has a better one. In terms of the game, the spectacle, me and Colin were at the Vikings Saints game a couple of years ago, which the Vikings won 28-25. We were given a really good game that day, but we went for a walk maybe 2 hours before the game, and it was very noticeable the amount of Vikings fans in the area. The purple jerseys were out in force, and it was kind of recognisable that evening that this is a serious team in terms of the support they have across the Ireland, UK, and across Europe. And I think come that day, it's going to be obviously a lot of green, but I think we might find it's taken over by a lot of purple.
Noel, the Jags, first of 2 Jags games happens the following week as they go to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium to take on the Bears. It's actually the Bears' home game, but London effectively has been a home venue for the Jags for some time. They obviously have, they're another one of the teams that has the Global Markets Programme rights in Ireland and are active in this market now too. And they won 2 games in London famously last year. It really suited them. So they'll hope to repeat the trick this year. As the NFL schedulers always have an eye to the narrative, and this pits 2 quarterback talents touted as generational, former number 1 overall pick Trevor Lawrence and current number 1 overall pick Caleb Williams. It's a tasty matchup.
It is. I mean, you kind of mentioned Caleb Williams there. I mean, he quickly feels like he's becoming a bit of a superstar. He obviously came from college, the whole NIL stuff, and he has a persona that's just bigger than the game himself. So from that point of view, I think that will drum up a lot of interest on people wanting to see Caleb Williams. Now, look, these international series games sell out anyway. They'd be full no matter what. But I think when you look at the Chicago Bears, they are one of the founding members of the NFL. They are one of the biggest supported teams. If you watch even the regular season, you watch most of the games they play in away games, they will still take up a big bulk of the stadium, and that's going to be no different over here. Obviously, as you say, it's technically their home game, although the Jags have been kind of homed here in the UK and Ireland for a number of years now, and I think they've probably built up their own little kind of supporters club here as well. So I think both teams will be well supported. I think both teams could be exciting teams to watch. They have some very good players. You talk about the 2 quarterbacks. Hopefully by then, Caleb Williams, it's being confirmed he is going to be starting. So hopefully by then maybe he'll be into a stride a bit, and he'll be comfortable in there. And I think we should get, for the international fans, a very, very good game between 2 teams who could be, the Bears want to get up there into the NFC North. We obviously know it's a tough division, but they feel like, given the moves they've made and what they've done, Ryan Pauls clearly feels like they can push the other 3 teams and fight for this division. And obviously, as I said earlier on, the Jags would have hoped to have taken their division last season, and the Texans kind of came out of nowhere. So potentially both teams will be in the mix for their divisions, and there'll be stuff to play for, and they'll feel like they can go out there and win. And for the fans, it should just be a good game between what could be 2 good teams.
The following week then, Colin, the Jags take their short trip to Wembley, to their nominal home stadium there, where they'll take on the Patriots, a very new look Patriots team. By that stage of the season, we'll see how Jacoby Brissett is going. The clamour for Drake May to start could be reaching fever pitch, and we may get to see yet another one of the first round QB picks from this year's draft, depending on what way that one shapes up.
Yeah, picked by a man who is the de facto GM, but not the GM. And I'm baffled by the Patriots' approach. I mean, they moved off of the Bill Belichick era. It was an opportunity to reset, but they ultimately decided not to do that.
And as you say his name, Colin, I'm sorry to interrupt. If anyone can lay claim to have won the offseason, it's Bill Belichick, in my opinion. He's had a brilliant offseason. He's a man transformed.
Yeah, he certainly he looks pretty happy, you would have to say, and I think although he fluffed the best line the other night about the fact of how he's being treated by the dynasty. I think they actually have gone totally overboard, and people feel a modicum of sympathy. I mean, I think that was difficult for any of us to imagine over the past couple of decades that we would ever feel sympathy for Bill Belichick, but here we are. But I'm not entirely sure why the Patriots went with what they did, and Shane was outlining earlier in the show about some of the decisions they have made. My concern for the Patriots is, whatever Bill Belichick's myriad flaws, and we know they exist, he was still a brilliant defensive mind. And you don't have that in the room anymore. That would be a concern. Good news, though, you're up against a team run by Trent Baalke, a man who admits to his own flatulence rather than just getting on with it. And I don't know what the Jaguars are at. The one thing that would probably give you a bit of optimism if you are a Jags fan is that Doug Peterson was asked in the rookie camp, was he going to be calling plays or would he be handing that off again? And he actually said, I'm going to have to think about it. They need Doug to be calling plays. If it's another season where he isn't doing that, it could be a long one, and it could be all change in Jacksonville. They might have a brand new stadium, a brand new head coach, and a brand new GM.
Shane, it's the 20th of October by this stage. Will you be traveling more in hope and or expectation, do you think?
Well, I'll tell you the way that most Patriot fans are feeling about it. There's a Belgian guy I met in Frankfurt last year when he was drinking the worst pint of Guinness ever seen in my life. We were talking. He was a Patriots fan, and he sent me a text when he saw this. He was like, "Please God, can we see a touchdown?" Because like a lot of the same fans who were there in Frankfurt will be there in Wembley. And we were owed at least a touchdown. That's the one thing we didn't get in Frankfurt. It was just an absolutely terrible offensive performance and offensive showing. And it wasn't even the players was bad, the play decisions was bad, the whole quarterback Koki to borrow a line from Colin between Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones is bad. So, if they come into this just at least trying to be ambitious and trying to pass the ball more than 3 yards in front of your face, then I'll be happy enough. Honest to God, at least I'd see the Patriots actually try to play football and not just give it to some lateral fella who's standing right beside you and see how far he can run it. It's like passing off a bag of laundry the way they're playing. The offense is playing in Frankfurt that time. So, look, that's what I'm hopeful to see. And I think the Jaguars have a really good chance of winning both of these games. I think the Bears are obviously the much more difficult challenge. And it's interesting now that the away game is the one that comes first before the home game. That's obviously them listening to the complaints of the Bills from last year. So that's, I guess, makes it an even tougher challenge for Jerod Mayo and all that's going on. Whether Jacoby Brissett or Drake May will be playing will, of course, be a debate before and after every game around the Patriots, and that will inevitably do most of the Patriots fans' heads in. But look, I'm relatively confident that Jerod Mayo was there last year, and that was the game that Bill Belichick lost his job because they were just that bad. And most of the people there as well, they just need to at least show some ambition with the talent they have and try to do something. If they lose by 21 points, fine. At least try to play some good football. And I don't want to undersell this too much because there will be a lot of Patriots fans there. I think maybe the bandwagoners might have gone on to the Chiefs by now, but I think there's still a lot of Patriots fans who will turn up and will make it a good raucous crowd. And the Jaguars, I think they're very comfortable in London. I think that they're going to get 2 wins from this to set them up very nicely to what is a very, very difficult AFC South challenge. So, look, maybe it's closer. I don't know. By the time we get to October, the Patriots might be the best team in the AFC East. I could severely doubt it, but you never know. But what I am afraid of, and just allude to what Colin was saying there, is that we've said it many times in this podcast, that dysfunctional franchises do dysfunctional things. And now that the dynasty is officially over, I feel like the New England Patriots are slipping into that category.
Shane, don't be trying to take the shine off the international series now, because November, the final game of the series, Novemberfest, It's the day before the 35th anniversary of German reunification, 10th of November in Munich. The Giants take on the Panthers, Brian. I can practically feel the Stein of Hofbrau in the Hofbrau house from the night before. Taste the salt on the pretzel. This is going to be a cracker.
I thought before we move on, I thought we were nearly getting Shane on a rant, but it's still the off season. I think that's to come during the season. Connor, you were missing a trick on this game. I thought you would be more excited about this game in particular than me. Any particular reason why? No?
Because it's in Munich.
No, I thought you'd be excited to see your good old pal, JV Leggett, as we like to say. He will be forcing down the field, hopefully.
A close contender for winning the offseason. I should have given him an honourable mention when we were talking about Belichick earlier on. He's already building his legend there. His press conferences are must-see TV.
Look, I think most NFL fans recognize this probably isn't the most popular of decisions in terms of this game being the one that's been selected for Munich. I think what they've recognized, doesn't matter what game they put in Munich, they could put the worst two teams in the league over in Munich or in Frankfurt, and they'd still sell it out because the nature of the support that the German fan base has. I think it was 2 million in the queue last year. I think it was something similar to the previous year. And like, bear in mind, there was 2 games last year. Now they've tightened the grip and only have the one this year. Having been to both the Frankfurt and Munich is the much better experience, I would say. No disrespect to the Frankfurt games. It's a better city to get around. It's a much more enjoyable place to go to. And we touched on it in a separate podcast. The Saturday before the game in Munich 2 years ago, every bar was full of NFL fans. Essentially, it was like a weekend celebration. And I imagine it'll be the same come November. And it was inevitable. This was the game, bearing in mind that they both brasses sent a number of former players over to Munich to do draft selections on the Saturday. Yeah, I think it was the one that everybody kind of picked up on very quickly. This was the game. But as a Giants fan, obviously I'm delighted to see my team, like you all are, with the exception of Column this year, to see our team in living colour. So yeah, I do look forward to November.
Right, great stuff. That's the last of the international games and the last of our early previews of the 2024 schedule, which has just been announced in the past 24 hours. There's something else that's going to be happening during the season as well, Colin, when we see Tom Brady making his debut as an analyst on Fox. Poor old Greg Olsen had to take a $7 million pay cut and got bumped out of the top spot to accommodate Brady. Let's watch that story develop as the season goes on. But you wanted to talk a little bit about Tom Terrific and what he's been up to over the past week.
Yeah, because I think it needs to be said. Tommy made his first appearance since the roast and proceeded to boo-hoo, feel very sorry for himself, and say that he was sorry he'd done it because it had massively impacted his kids, and he had never stopped to consider this. Never once. Tom Brady, 46 years of age, multi-millionaire, in the media spotlight for more than 2 decades. Like, Connor, he has teams of people. Like, he has not just, I suppose, the Dublin office of Teneo, but he has the Dublin office plus advising him. And at no point did anyone, nor Tom himself, go, I wonder, would this have any negative impacts for kids, teenage kids who are in school? Could this possibly play out in any way? Once again, Tom Brady made a decision based on what Tom Brady wanted and is now looking at the consequences of his own actions and is blaming it once again on everybody else. It's everybody else's fault except Tom. It's never Tom's fault. Naive, 46-year-old, naive multi-millionaire. Plus, the only time Tom got upset during the actual roast was when there was a joke about his billionaire buddy, Robert Kraft. Why did Tommy get upset during that? Because he wants to be in the club. And if you want to be in the club, you got to protect the club. And so that's what Tom did. And then afterwards, he's seen the impact and now he's not shawling. Grow up, Tom.
Well, sorry, I was going to hop in that. All these advisors are telling him to whinge. So we're here talking about it, and we're here talking about Tom Brady and Tom Brady's center of attention. That's what that is. Of course, he knew what he was going into with people slagging him off about Giselle and his kids and all that. He knew. But the follow on that was for him to whinge and go on and say, "Oh, boo-hoo, look at me." That's just part of the tactics. And here we are talking.
So he's using his kids as props.
Well. He's using it to try and get some attention and to try and get
No, he'll
try
defend.
to get some sympathy in an era where, as you mentioned earlier, Bill Belichick is feeling too much of the love.
He'll defend his billionaire buddy, and he'll throw his ex-wife, a woman who stood by his side when he lied, about retiring, when he spent time on the road, and he'll use her and his kids as props. Yep, that tells us all we need to know about the character of the man.
Yeah, and I also did find it interesting. I don't think he's commentating any Patriots games this year. So obviously he's just to stop him from having to criticize any of the guys in blue on the field as well. I wonder if that was moustached in as well.
Yeah,
it's a shame Eli didn't go along. That would have been even better.
Before we shovel any more dirt on the advisors, I just want to clarify that neither I or my colleagues are involved in any way, shape, or form with telling Tom Brady what to do, and I have no part in that particular mess. I do enjoy a good column rant though. And look, before we close out, there's an important column related announcement we wanted to make on the Irish NFL show to share with you this evening. Column, I'll just give you the floor.
Yeah, this will be my last show for the foreseeable. I suppose just I may as well say, rather than say personal reasons, my mom isn't well, and so I need to give that the time and support. She gave it to me, raised me, so I need to do that. And people will have seen I haven't been able to dedicate the time to the show that I would like to. And I think maybe it isn't always obvious to people. We don't just come on here and ramble on for an hour or an hour and a half. There is a huge amount of time and effort that goes into the background in terms of putting it together. And I think that it is the best decision for right now. This is not saying goodbye forever, but it is for the foreseeable. I need to dedicate my time elsewhere, and I think it is only fair to you guys that you are able to know where you stand, that we are not coming up to a show that's taking place at, say, 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and I have to message at 7:30 to say, guys, I can't make it tonight, really sorry. And suddenly you go from thinking, okay, I needed to have X number of talking points available to, I need to double that. So it's for that reason that I'm doing it. I hope to still be able to contribute here and there. It might be stepping back for 6 months, it might be 12 months. I don't know. I do know that you have a great team. There's the 4 people here, and Kieran is obviously involved as well. So the show will continue. Things will be the same but different. Perhaps there won't be the same level of rants as there were on the show, but for right now, this is what I need to do, and that is I suppose the update from me.
And look, we're very well aware, Colm, that it's not only the right decision for you, but the right decision. Obviously, we support you and your family at this time as well, and that's where your attention should be. We'll obviously hugely miss you, but it's a bientôt, as we'd say, rather than an au revoir. And we're looking forward to you making cameo appearances in the future, as I know you will. We joked about maybe we'd retire a vibrantly colored Hawaiian shirt and race it to the rafters, but it's not a retirement, so we're not going to do that. We're keeping that spot very much open. And as you said, look, we've expanded the roster here. Colm leaves and we bring 3 people in. That's what it takes to fill those boots. So we're fully supportive of you, and look, in some ways it's a sad time to see you stepping back, even though it may only be temporarily. But we wish you very well, and we wish you and your family very well over the next couple of months and in your endeavors. And before we wrap up, and I don't want to turn it into a roast, Brian, but is there any short stories you want to tell from the deep dark archives of the Irish NFL show? You guys have labored at the coalface for a lot longer than the rest of us.
God, I could be here all day with stories. Kind of what I would say is having gone and experienced the same circumstance, and Noel has as well. With our late mothers, I fully understand and appreciate I suppose, the enormity of what Colin has to deal with personally, emotionally with the family. So I fully acknowledge why this has to be done, and it certainly is the right decision. In terms of storylines with Colin, I mean, I could write a book. I think great thing about me and Colin, we're so different, but that's what makes it even better, because that's why we get on. But we've covered 3 Super Bowls together. We've done numerous games in the UK, and so many stories over the course of the year. And we were, I suppose, obviously it's a different crew now, but we're, I suppose, the original 2 as part of the original foursome that set it all up. But like, Colin is a friend off the show as much as he is on it. So I'll miss him. But even tonight was great crack to have the rant. I'm already thinking about getting that rant clipped up. But you touched on it there. Noel and Shane came on. We did a fantastic night down in Cork during the draft. The coverage will still continue, and I'm really looking forward to another off season and another season ahead with you guys. So it's going to be great.
I have to point to the fact that like, in terms of the antithesis, look what Brian is wearing, and look what I am wearing tonight, which definitely highlights it. And it's been an amazing.
I'm a company man.
It's been an amazing 3.5 years. Hopefully there will be more in the future. I think just some of the things, like in terms of the opportunities to go and travel and go to games with Brian, to see him watch the Giants in London in the press box will live long in the memory. But obviously, coming up to this tonight, I was thinking back and about some of the kind of the moments that stood out. And being a Broncos fan, say the Wade Phillips interview, the Justin Simmons, when we talked to him 3 years ago when he was the best safety in the league at that time. But the other pieces were when we did the first Super Bowl virtually, and I went into the Zoom room at the time, and you had to raise your virtual hand and be called on. And I asked Brendan Daly a question, and they said Colin Cronin Irish NFL Show, and I could see Brendan kind of sit up, and then I started talking. He heard the accent, and he absolutely came alive, and that was magic. And the other 2 that probably stand out was, again, as a Broncos fan, but we spoke to Mark Schlereth, and he gave us an hour, and it was incredible. And the other was Otis Anderson. He might be the funniest man I have ever spoken to. He won a Super Bowl MVP, and he had so many stories, a truly wild man. But yeah, the opportunities we've had to kind of record together, to travel together, going to Vegas and covering the Super Bowl this year, and interacting and getting to know people and seeing the community kind of come together has been really, really fantastic.
And Colin, look, we look forward to welcoming you back very soon, fingers crossed. And, thanks again for your part in building the foundations on which we all stand. And thanks equally as importantly to everybody who's watching now, who's listens on a regular basis, interacts with us on our social channels, and is part of the community that yourself, Brian, and the guys have built since day one. We're privileged to be a part of it. We enjoy it every week, and we hope that everybody tuning into the Irish NFL Show enjoys it too. And we'll talk to you very soon.